Hi, I'm Diane, your host of Epic Conversations. Thanks for joining us. We're here today, back again with my special guest of honor, John Bullock. John graduated from Charis Bible College, third-year ministry track. Now, this is after his 37-year career in the Air Force. And he's another accomplishment. He's been married to the same beautiful woman, Cheryl, for 44 years. That is impressive. John has set out to read the Bible by faith and also with fresh eyes, which led him to write this book, which we'll have information on the upload, Seeing with Fresh Eyes. So today I've asked John back, and we are going to talk about a tough subject. And before we introduce this tough subject, I got to tell you a story. John and I watched the early years. It's a video of the early years of Billy Graham. And it was so funny. The first time he ever spoke at a missions in a small chapel, he got up there and he grabbed his finger like he was winding up like you're going to throw a baseball. And he throws his finger at the camera and says, "Sin is missing the mark." And the funny thing was the entire audience went, "Oh," like this. The whole crowd. I just thought that was funny. So we are going to be talking about this tough subject of sin. And we want to know if you are stuck in any habits or, if that you seem like you just can't get rid of or free from. John's going to help us, show us a different way with fresh eyes to see this problem in a different light, and you will be free. So thanks for joining us. And John, you're on the hot seat now.
I am.
Yes, you are.
I think.
So tell us what you've learned through the...
Well, as I was going through everything, I realized that if I needed to understand salvation, then I needed to understand what we were being saved from.
That's a good point.
And one of the things, obviously, is sin. When John the Baptist first saw Jesus coming to the Jordan, he said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world."
Singular.
And it's singular. So, and later on we see Jesus hanging around with sinners. So the sins didn't seem to bother him as much as the sin did. In other words, the symptoms of the disease didn't bother him as much as the disease itself.
That's a good way of putting it, contrasting symptoms with the disease itself.
Right. And that's why a lot of times chasing after symptoms doesn't cure a disease.
You're right. Good point.
So to really discover what was going on, I had to go back to Genesis and find out what went wrong at the very beginning. And one of the things, I wanted to read Genesis for what it said and not what I thought it was supposed to say. And one of the things it says is that the serpent was one of the beasts of the field that God had created. And we'll get back to that, but one of the things that people have a problem with sin is if you look at it only as Billy Graham in that one story said, that it's missing the mark, that there's a list of things that God gave us to do, and all you do is miss one of them, and that's sin, then if you continue to think about that, really then all you need is a good behavioral modification program.
And we know that doesn't work.
Yeah, so that you just keep all the rules.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work.
It doesn't work. We find the more you focus on trying to do all the rules, the more you focus on yourself, and the more you focus on not what you're supposed to be focusing on.
Right. So maybe the rules aren't the problem.
Right, like you said, the symptoms aren't the problem, right?
Right. So we find out that the beast, the serpent, is a beast of the field, and he obviously comes to Eve. And the first question, as before their conversation starts, is what's the difference between Eve and the serpent, other than looks. but what innately is different? Mm-hmm. And we heard that Adam was created by God, mm-hmm. and then God breathed into them the breath of life.
So they're created in His image.
They're created in His image with His life breathed into them, and then He became a living soul. Then they became a living soul. Mm-hmm. That's not how the serpent was created.
How was the serpent created?
The serpent was just created from the dust of the ground. He's just an animal. God never breathed into him. He's not in the image of God. So
that's a good
here's something to consider. What if, from the serpent's point of view, he was telling the truth?
When he said what?
When he came to Eve and said, "Has God said that you shouldn't eat from any of these trees?" And Eve rushes to the fence and says, "Of course He hasn't said we can't eat from any of the trees. We can eat from all the trees except this one." But if you go back in Hebrew, and the
Bible was written in Hebrew in the Old Testament.
In Genesis it was, and the serpent's question actually kind of dies out. He really says, or it really says, "Has God told you to do this?"
So he's putting doubt.
He's putting doubt in there, but he's approaching the problem as an animal would approach the problem. And Eve is not supposed to do that.
Now, it's kind of interesting because you said the serpent's approaching it from his point of view.
Right. You want to hear what that point of view is?
Well, yeah.
So the serpent's, the difference between a man and an animal is that, as Jesus told the devil in the wilderness during his temptation in Matthew, it says, "Man shall live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God."
That's right.
The serpent was never told that.
Yeah.
Man was told, "Don't eat from this tree." The serpent was never told that.
Mm-hmm.
So really, when you put all that together, the temptation sounds like when the serpent talks to Eve, says, "Has God told you to do this? Why do you have to pay any attention to what God told you to do?"
Because God's not talking to that.
Yeah, don't you work like me? I mean, I have instincts. Mm-hmm. God made me too, and He put instincts inside me, and I know what's good for me and what's not good for me. Mm-hmm. So why don't you work the same way? And so Eve considers that, and then looks at the tree and sees that it's good for food and good to look at and good to make one wise, and eats the tree. But what happens there? What happens is that Eve, and Adam, of course, too, makes the decision to put themselves above God instead of paying attention to the directions that they got from mm-hmm. God, from outside themselves. Mm-hmm. They decided to follow these newly awakened directions they're getting from inside themselves that supposedly benefit themselves.
Mm-hmm. And it's like they put themselves as God. And partaking of the tree, I remember you mentioned that in your book, and partaking of the tree of good and evil, that put them in a place of judgment.
Yes.
They now could judge, but man only knows in part. So we can't see the whole picture. I mean, God created the universe.
Right.
We can't see the rest of the universe. We can't see everything. So when we start judging, acting like God, like you said, put themselves above God, it's really out of order, number one. Number two, they don't even have the capability to do that because they only see in part. And that is kind of interesting because that puts condemnation on them. Exactly. When they become, because when you judge, you've got the three fingers coming back.
Right. If you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there's nothing you can do with that knowledge except become a judge.
That's good.
So yeah. the first people they judged, unfortunately, were themselves. And they knew that they were guilty. Yeah. They saw that they were naked, and they hid from God.
So what?
And then they judge God and say, well, this is unfair that you put me in this situation, that the serpent would deceive me and then I would do this. You know, this woman that you gave me, and start shifting the blame because somebody has to be judged. Somebody has to be at fault. See? And before that, they didn't have to be. So
when people are stuck in a sin or a habit, they're trying to blame somebody, and they're going round in circles under this guilt and condemnation.
Right. So something got broken in them. And that's what that Greek word that Billy Graham was referring to, it's hamartia. And it's the Greek word, it's used all through the New Testament, it's the Greek word that translated sin. And a secondary meaning is missing the mark. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, there's a rule there, I didn't do it, therefore I sinned. But that's overly simplistic. Mm-hmm. Because what it really is, that word has come down into English unchanged. And it's still used in drama. It's used in tragedy, tragic plays, where the hero is a hero. He's strong, he's got all the advantages, he's handsome, he's everything. But he has a hamartia, he has a fatal flaw. Whether it's greed or selfishness or anything. And ultimately he will fall into disgrace, or he'll die by the end of the play. So that's why, because of that fatal flaw, that's why we have to be born again and not have a behavioral modification program. We have to start over. We're irretrievably flawed. And I thought this is a really strange idea. But then as I read through the New Testament some more, in Romans 1, in 2 Peter, in Jude, people that choose to follow their own way are described as becoming more and more like brute beasts. So this is something that everybody has to remember. Every day we're faced with the same temptation that Eve was. Mm-hmm. Do we follow ourselves, or do we follow what we think is right, or what God has told us is right? Because every time we follow God, we move more and more toward light and life. Every time we follow ourselves, go more for darkness and death. But if we're born again...
Yes, I was just going to say that you need to be born again to have the Spirit alive in order to have the hope to follow God. Because how can you follow God if you don't even have Him alive in you?
And you have that hamartia removed. So the core, the disease is gone.
Yeah.
Now, do you still keep on sinning? Sure, you do.
The symptoms may still linger.
Because it's walking out, and it's what Paul said in Philippians, said, even like when I was here to tell you what to do all the time, even so when I'm away, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Yeah. Continue to make the right choices.
Yes,
and continue to become more and like what we're predestined to become in the image of His Son. And it starts to all fit together once you understand what what sin really is, and that we can be free from it. We're no longer bound by sin. We're no longer controlled by sin. What we're doing now is learning how to live in a new way.
And that's a fresh idea of looking at it, because we're still learning. And therefore, you go around like a cycle here of, okay, I heard, I made a choice, I got free, I learned, made a choice. And because we make a mistake along the way, doesn't mean we're condemned, because sin was condemned at the beginning, not us. But we just keep following God, keep making the right choices, and eventually we're working out our salvation. Thank you. That was good. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. We have more episodes coming up with John, and we look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you got something out of that. In the meantime, have an epic day in the Lord. Hi, I'm Diane Grubus, and I've started a ministry, and I want to bless you. I'm so excited about it. DianeGrubus.com. Go to the website and check out all the wonderful things that we have in store for you. We have some great epic conversations with some powerful guests, and some teachings, free downloads. And we would love to have you join us, love to have you partner with us. We appreciate you, and we want to hear from you. So check out the website, and thank you.